This was our first year ever raising, pasturing, and processing chickens, and we certainly learned a lot, especially what not to do. There was a lot of that. Earlier this spring, we got 75 baby chicks from a hatchery near Cincinnati, 25 Rhode Island males, 25 Rhode Island Red females, and we were able to get another 25 chicks that were mixed and unidentified for a pretty cheap price, so we thought, why not? I'll get into why we chose Rhode Island Reds later on. We opted to pick them up ourselves since the hatchery was so close to us, as opposed to having them shipped, because we were really trying to avoid stressing these birds out as much as possible. Since this was our first year, we obviously wanted to start out small with the intention of having a good supply of meat and eggs for our immediate families this first year, and then potentially scaling up the next year until we eventually start selling the meat and eggs. At this point, it's Thursday evening, and we know we're going to be processing them on Saturday, but we can't process them here. We have to transport them to another part of the farm, and you have to cut off their feed 12 to 14 hours before processing. I've also heard 24 hours is the magic number. I still don't know. If you do know, let me know in the comments. I'm still trying to figure that one out. Either way, we have to move 25 of the yellows. Those are the mixed chicks that we got at the hatchery. There's 50 total chickens in this tractor, and the yellow and reds are kind of mixed together. I know that was also a lesson that we learned not to do. As you'll see, we really shot ourselves in the foot here by making this so much more complicated than it needed to be. I honestly thought that this was going to be really quick and easy, but these chickens were freaking out, and half of them got loose over the course of the next 2 hours of us trying to get these chickens into the bed of this trailer. Using a net was kind of hit or miss, but let me tell you, getting your ass kicked by a flock of chickens will really humble you. Eventually, we got them into the trailer and moved them to this temporary holding spot. Now it's Saturday morning, it's processing day, and having never done anything like this before, I spent the last few days reading books and watching other YouTube videos on how to process, and particularly on how to eviscerate the chicken. There's only so much that you can read up on. At some point, you have to just figure it out for yourself. This is our fairly crude budget setup. I have to say though, our equipment and our setup worked quite well. The only thing that I would change is the layout. With the way that we had it set up, the defeatherer ended up spraying feathers into the scalding pot, but that's not really a big deal. So this is our setup. We got 2 large killing cones, and I'm glad we got 2. Having only one would have created another bottleneck in the assembly line. But they're nailed into a wooden frame that Kevin built with some 5-gallon buckets underneath to collect the blood. You also want to make sure that you have a sharp sticker knife for the chicken's sake. Next is our scalding pot, simply a turkey fryer hooked up to a propane tank. There's a thermometer in there as well to keep track of the water temperature, and we found that 160 degrees Fahrenheit would be kind of the sweet spot for us. One thing to note, a professional industrial rotating scalder is probably the first equipment upgrade that I would get. The scald really determines how easy or difficult the feathers will be to remove. And keeping the water at a specific temperature over the course of the day was very difficult to do. We were constantly turning the propane up and down and just checking the water temperature. It was all over the place. So contrary to what I found that others have said on YouTube, I really think that the most important piece of equipment, especially if you're thinking about upgrading, is going to be your scalder, slightly more so than the feather plucker, which is what most people recommend. Also, it does help to have a little bit of soap in the water to help the water come in contact with the feathers and the skin, because the feathers have a water wicking quality to them and the soap helps with that. So we used Dr. Bronner's Castile soap since it's more food safe than Dawn dish soap. I mean, I don't know what chemicals they put in Dawn, so I wanted to use Castile soap instead. Next is our budget feather plucker. This thing is great. I highly recommend it. It was like $18 on Amazon, something like that. It attaches to a drill that we clamped to the table, and we used a zip tie to hold the trigger down. Definitely use a corded drill though, don't use a battery operated one. Again, if you over or undercook the bird in the scalder, then the defeathering process becomes another bottleneck, which is why I think the scalder is the more important piece of equipment. It doesn't really matter how good your feather plucker is if you don't have a good scald. Then the bird moves on to the evisceration station. The one thing I'll say about this is get yourself a good stainless steel table, ideally one that's 6 feet or longer. You want something that you can hose off easily throughout the day. As far as eviscerating the bird goes, my dad and Kevin were a lot better at this than I was. It takes a few birds to get the process down. John Siskovich has a great video on YouTube where he explains and shows how to do this. We used that as that video as a reference for us. So hopefully one day when I'm more proficient at it, I'll make my own video explaining it. We had a couple bins to sort out the organs. We kept everything except for the heads and the intestines, I think, for the most part. A lot of it will be used for dog food. I wasn't sure if you can use the chicken head for dog food or not. Google was giving me mixed results. If you know, please let me know in the comments also. Can chicken heads be used for dog food? And if so, I mean, do you have to do anything to them? We also have a couple plastic bins full of water for cleaning and cooling the carcasses. There's another ice bath too. We moved it into the inside of the garage to keep it out of the sunlight.
Okay, here's our cold bath. And this is where all our other...
The last step of the process is packaging. I opted to go with a vacuum sealer instead of shrink wrap. Shrink wrap is certainly going to be faster and cheaper, but I really don't like the idea of heated plastic that comes into contact with food. These chickens are part of a stress-free, pasture-raised, regenerative upbringing. Great efforts are made to make sure that these chickens are raised without GMOs, chemicals, or hormones. Only to have them come into contact with heated plastic at that very last part of the stage, which could potentially leach chemicals into the meat, it just doesn't sit right with me. So vacuum sealing isn't a perfect solution either, but I felt like it's the lesser of the two evils. Anyways, in hindsight, I'm glad that we got the Rhode Island Red females, but I do regret getting the Rhode Island Red broilers, the males, because we learned that they're not really good meat birds. They taste great, but they're very small in weight. Most were around 2.5 to 2.9 pounds when we were done and we weighed the carcasses. They also take a while to kind of grow. We went with Rhode Island Reds because they're cheaper, but when you factor in the cost of the feed over the lifetime versus their final weigh-in, it really isn't worth it to go with Rhode Island Reds. So I think next year we're going to go with Cornish Cross for our meat birds. I'll tell you right now though, it took us a full day. I think it was 8 or 9 hours to completely process 25 chickens. Keep in mind though that there was 3 of us doing it. All of us were self-taught first-timers using budget equipment and figuring out the scalding temperature / time ratio coupled with the defeatherer. It took that process kind of took the longest, and there was a few hiccups there. But once we figured that out, things sped up quite a bit. I actually had a lot of fun learning how to do this. I was honestly dreading this day, the moment that we got those baby chicks, especially the killing part, but you really do become desensitized to the process pretty quickly for what that's worth. And the evisceration part really, I think it teaches you a lot about the chicken anatomy. If you're thinking about getting into raising chickens for processing, I think it's a good life skill to learn. And hopefully this video has taught you something, maybe what not to do. But thanks for watching and supporting this channel. And if you made it this far into the video, please like and subscribe. It really helps out. And I'll see you in the next video.